My name is Baltazar. I'm a product designer. How many of you guys know what that is? A digital product designer? Kinda? Okay. How many of you guys have heard of Creative Market? Yeah? No? It's a design resource site, and I currently work for them. I'm heading up the conversion team with them, so I've been brought on board to kind of spearhead their conversions and kind of get that going a little bit. How many designers again? I saw a couple of hands. Oh, I can't really see. Just 3 of you guys? Really? And the rest of you guys are developers? Cool. Well, I like developers too. Yeah. Keith is one of my best friends, and he's a developer, so hope that creates a bridge between us. Cool. Well, I wanted to talk to you guys just briefly about designing for human behavior. I'm a psych major. I didn't go to school for design. After I majored in child development primarily because I wanted to be like a counselor and that kind of stuff. And out of college, I had a bootleg version of Photoshop and started creating business cards and stuff for churches, and got really hooked on design. And from that point, kind of just took off from there. And I've been really privileged to work with some really fun companies and agencies everywhere from Santa Monica. I'm from Orange County originally, so moving on up the state of California. So I worked in Santa Monica and then in the Bay Area with several startups and several bigger companies, such as companies like Yahoo and Wells Fargo and several others that I probably shouldn't mention since we're recording. Still have NDAs and stuff. So yeah, so that's a little bit of background on me. I also work at Bethel Media here in town as well. So I'm kind of paralleling both Creative Market and Bethel Media at the moment. So yeah, I wanted to talk to you a little bit about human behavior. And one of the things that's going to stand out to you guys is I'm going to be talking a little bit about error messages quite a bit, but that's not necessarily what I want you guys to take home with you. I really want to talk about how users actually perceive what you're designing, what you're creating, what you're building, whatever it is that you're doing. How many of you guys work on apps or actual software that interacts with users? Mostly everybody. What do the rest of you guys do? I'm curious.
I mean, I'm here at the class yesterday.
Cool.
My
Cool.
whole technology experience was from 6 to 9.
Okay, great.
I'm software in code, so I want to start making apps and I want to get into it, but I'm not.
Okay, cool. Cool, that's great to know. And everybody else, I saw that there was some interest in user experience design on this side. Is that something you currently do, or is it something you're aspiring to do? You currently do? Okay. How many of you guys work for a startup or an agency in town or in the area? Okay, I guess, who doesn't? Do you guys work for somebody remotely? Yeah? Okay, cool. Great. Just want to know who I'm talking to. Cool. So let me move on. One of my favorite quotes is this quote by this guy. I can't pronounce his name. Just kidding. If you can't explain it simply, you don't understand it well enough. One of the things that I've learned, I started off as a brand designer and print designer and stuff many ages ago. I'm not that old, I promise. And one of the things that somebody told me that completely blew my mind was a good brand, a good logo structure, if you can't draw it with a pen and paper, it's not going to stick most of the time. And that just it started making me think about design in a completely different way, because I see a lot of different complex logo types and all these logo marks and stuff, and the reality is if you can't even remember it enough to draw it on a pen and paper, how likely is it that somebody else is going to remember it and carry it on for the long haul kind of thing? You know what I mean? So this is kind of where that inspiration for this quote, or with this quote, came from. I didn't write the quote, he did. Or I didn't say that, he did. Anyway, so as software and application designers, I'll just read what I have here, and developers, we sometimes focus just on what screens we are working to create and forget that a user somewhere on some device using a mouse or a finger will be interacting with the stuff we're building. A lot of times it's really easy to get so focused on the specific screen that you're designing or building, or that a designer passed on to build, or whatever it is, that you actually forget sometimes that somebody somewhere in this country or a different country is going to be interacting with what you're building. And that's really important to keep in mind, at least from my perspective and from my experience. It's really important to keep in mind because everybody has different types of behaviors. Have you guys ever, okay, I'll just phrase it this way. I one time saw, I don't even remember what company it was, but they were testing like motion, like they were testing televisions that had like, that were focused on motion and human like motion. So basically if you wanted to turn it up, you would give it a motion to turn up and stuff like that. And it was so mind-boggling to see different people from different regions and like from different countries, the different signals that they would give the television. Like some people would tell it to turn it up like this, other people would go like this. Like it was just crazy. So all that to say that every human being is completely different. Even if you live in the same town, you work in the same company, you do the same type of job, you're still probably very different from the person you're working with. So keeping in mind when we're designing software and all these different things and building stuff, everybody's completely different, right? So there's never going to be a one size fits all, but there is going to be a one size feels right, at least, right? So again, a lot of times we focus on the specific software we're creating and designing and building, but we also forget that there's actually like a hardware component that's also taking place. So if there's a phone, so one thing that's really mind-boggling to me is that you can still, at this moment, go on the App Store and find hyperlocal apps like Foursquare and stuff like that. I'm not saying those specifically, but hyperlocal apps like Foursquare and Yelp that are not location-based. That's just like mind-boggling to me. How is it that a hyperlocal application for your phone is not location-based? In other words, one of the first things you do with Foursquare or Yelp is as soon as you create an account or you log on to the app, it asks you if it can use your location to give you better results. Some of these applications don't do that. So then how is that even hyperlocal? Like how is that using software? I mean, how is that using the hardware to complement the software? Does that make sense? Kind of? Okay. In the same way, computers and websites, same thing. Phones and apps, a lot of times we don't use the apps appropriately with the hardware and all that stuff. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my journey with error messages. I've struggled a lot working with different product teams. And what a product team is in a startup environment is basically, for example, we have Creative Market. Creative Market is one platform with a ton of different facets. Like we have photography, 3D design, and all these different resources for designers that we offer. So it's one product, which is Creative Market, but we have two teams. So one of the teams is the product or platform team, which is working on specific features that make the platform look better. And then we have the conversion team, which is focused on designing and developing features that increase conversions, right? So those two are called product teams, right? We each have our product team. So each product team consists of a product designer, a product manager, a couple of front-end developers, and a couple of back-end developers to make everything happen and run smoothly, right? So I was saying something about product teams, and I don't remember. Yeah, so basically that's what a product designer does inside of a product team. Is you're essentially just designing for the specific product that you're working on or the specific aspect of the product that you're working on. So I wanted to talk a little bit about error messages. Okay, I remember what I was saying. One of my frustrations working with product teams a lot of times is that we're constantly focused, especially in an area like where I currently work. I am a product designer for the conversion team. So our goal is to increase conversions, right? So if you tell somebody that your goal is to increase conversions, you're automatically going to cancel out any other specific feature that is just going to make the user feel good, and you're going to focus on which one is going to give you a higher conversion rate per transaction, right? So we focus more on like the checkout process and those types of things because we want to increase conversions, right? So I've struggled a lot with that because I'm really focused on human behavior. So focusing on the things like the checkout process and all that stuff is great, but at the same time, one of the challenges that I've found, and as I'll show you guys in a minute, is that we don't communicate with our users enough, and we don't create trust with our users enough. And the thing is, like, if you meet somebody for the first time, you can guide them to go somewhere, but if you actually build a relationship with them, you can actually guide them to go somewhere and they feel a lot better and they would be more likely to keep going on with the conversation with you, right? Because they understand, they're starting to get to know you, they trust you a little bit more, and if you were to ask them for $5 probably at the end of the hallway, they'd probably, maybe, not everybody, but maybe they'd give it to you, right? Because you've actually put in the work and the effort to get to know them a little bit better. So, all that to say, this. How many of you guys like error messages? Like, yeah, and like really being frustrated with something like a website that you would just want to throw the computer out the window or something? Because it just doesn't understand you, right? It's just a machine, but we're the people responsible. So how many questions does a user ask themselves when they receive an error message that reads something like incorrect entry? That just drives me crazy. If you tell me it's an incorrect entry, I'm going to start asking questions like this. What's the incorrect entry? Did I spell it incorrectly? Did I skip a space? Like, tell me what's going on. You just told me what the problem is. I already know what the problem is. I see it. It's in red now, right? Like, that's not going to make my life easier. That's not going to make me enjoy what I'm doing. So, yeah, these are some of the questions that users might ask when they get some type of error message that just says incorrect entry. Right? And it's pretty frustrating. I'm sure you guys have experienced it at some level, on some device, on some website, on some application. So again, most product teams would disregard something as so insignificant as a properly labeled error message and instead jump to a higher converting feature, which is what I've become so frustrated with. And yes. So one thing I found is that by making insignificant error messages detailed and descriptive, we have shown user empathy, allowing users to trust us, proceed confidently, and ultimately increase conversion significantly more than a simple feature. So instead of just focusing on fixing a feature, we've actually tried to build relationships with our users, and that allows them to walk forward confidently, knowing that we're not trying to screw them over or just take their money. We actually care about them and want them to get something out of our product. And the end result is there's a transaction and we get paid for it, which is great. But they're okay with that as long as they're getting what they need because they're thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about our profit, right? Here's an example with a company. This is a success message that I created with a company that I was working with. I can't share specifics about the company, but it's pretty much a gardening product. Basically, it lets homeowners or renters or whoever use an application to hire a lawn care professional or a lawn care team or whatever. And you get to set your preferences on how often you want them to come, what you want them to do with the grass and all of that stuff. So this is a success message that I created for one of their pages or one of their things that I did, whatever that is. So answering something like, awesome, all of your preferences are up to date after they've filled out this form changes the conversation completely. Now they can proceed confidently knowing that everything they just did is actually being taken into account, and as they proceed, you're remembering and you're getting to know who they are. And they're also getting to know you and getting to trust you as a company, right? So just wanted to share that example with you guys. So we are creating a relationship based on trust, which creates confidence. Said that over and over again. My focus has gone from increasing conversions to focusing on user empathy and behavior confidence. And with that said, I wanted to share a couple of things that I strive for. They're more UX principles that I strive for. And yeah, I'm not even going to talk about what's in my head right now. I was going to kind of talk about the differences of like user experience design and product design and all that stuff. I'm not even going to open up that can of worms. So here are 9 solutions that I strive for on every product I work on. So simple and natural dialogue, which is really, really important. The best feeling in the world is having a conversation with somebody that understands you, somebody who speaks your language. As designers for digital products, we sometimes forget that our ultimate goal is to communicate to a human being, not a machine. Use dialogue that users can understand and relate to. And by the way, please excuse my spelling. It's you're probably not seeing it all, but if you catch something, I'm sorry. Next thing would be speak the user's language. This is super important for me when designing for a group of lawyers. Create a product that speaks lawyer, not just looks lawyer. Get into a persona that you are designing for. How many of you guys know what personas are? A couple of you guys? So this is a huge thing, and this is not just a copywriter's responsibility. It's not just a designer's responsibility. It can also be a developer's responsibility. I've worked with many, many teams that the designers and developers are kind of off in their own worlds, and it's really frustrating because there's no communication. Therefore, at the end result is a broken, unrelatable product that nobody really cares about. We're just all there for a paycheck, right? One of the companies that has completely changed my perspective regarding teams is actually Creative Market. We were recently, a couple months ago, we were out in San Francisco in the main office, and we had everybody in the room. So everybody from support to like, what other branches in the company are there? Everybody from support, all like engineers, front end and back end developers. We had like marketing people, brand people, product designers, everybody that works in the company, like everybody, even I think the finance guy was there. And we were talking about search, and the engineer that focuses specifically on search, he was talking about what they were doing with Elasticsearch and all these different things. And it was mind-boggling to me to actually see some of the customer service people start asking questions about how the search was going to work. And some of the designers were asking questions of how the search was going to work. Can we do this? Have you tried this? What if we did something like this? To me, that just showed so much ownership from everybody in the company. It was really, really impressive to see. And it's been really, really fun getting to work with a company like that has so much ownership in the product. And it shows through everything they ship. Every time they ship something, everybody in the company has looked at it. Everybody in the company has QA'd it. It's just really, really fun to get to work with the team that's so tight-knit and that really gives a crap about what they're working on. It's not just a paycheck, but like most of my conversations throughout the day are with engineers. Like it's not even with designers. So that's the kind of culture that they've created on there. Number 3 is minimize memory load. People are really bad at remembering things, so let the machine remember things for them. Like I said, location-based. How many of you guys shop like Crate and Barrel or anything like that? I love checkout processes. I like to see like best practices and stuff. And it's really interesting when you go through a checkout process and when they ask you to enter your billing information or your shipping information, it usually reads something like your street address, and then the city, and then the zip code, and then the country, and all these different things, right? But then you go to a company like Crate and Barrel and asks you for your street address and your zip code. And immediately you fill in your zip code and it fills everything else in for you, right? So that's actually minimizing memory load. That's kind of what I'm talking about here. So you'd be surprised how many, and there I go with the hyperlocal rant. So use constructive error messages. Tell the user why an error happened and how they can fix it. Don't repeat the error. It's obvious that something went wrong. Yeah, I feel pretty strongly about that. Make clear exits. Give the user options to get out or go back from your interface. Don't let them resolve to the native back button on their device, whatever that is. Whatever device that is, I mean, not whatever that, anyway. How would the user go back or get out if there wasn't a machine here and it was simply paper they were dealing with? So that's always a great thing to come back to, is like, if you actually start putting pieces of paper together, how many of you guys are familiar with material design from Google? The concept of material design came from ink and paper. So if you notice some of the shading and all the shadows and stuff from material design, they're layered as if it was paper, which is amazing and great and really complex. So when it comes down to like trying to figure out an exit, like get off of your computer and maybe put on a couple of pieces of paper together and figure out how you can create an exit for your user, or does your user feel stuck, kind of thing, right? I'm trying to remember, I was laughing in my head when I was talking about this because I just went on some type of application or something and I couldn't figure out how to get out. Like I had already signed in and it didn't let me go anywhere else. So like create an exit for your users. Always let them go back. Don't depend on the back button on your phone, especially if it's Android. Don't depend on those buttons. That's not the end-all solution. Okay? Cool. I mean, make your own choices, but make shortcuts. Allow shortcuts. Asana does a great job at this. Allowing shortcuts lets you cover a larger spectrum of users. Lets you cover a larger spectrum of users. So sometimes we have people that are really tech savvy that really know a lot of shortcuts. I know people that are. I'm a Sketch guy 100%. If any of you designers know what that is, I switched from Photoshop or the Creative Cloud to Sketch, and I stand by it 100%. But there's some people that have moved from, they don't want to move from Photoshop because they're so used to all of the shortcuts. And so they resolved to something which is like a copycat of Sketch, which is called Adobe XD, which still sucks. So just because they don't want to get away from the shortcuts, right? But there's shortcuts on Sketch too. You just got to take the time to actually learn them. Give feedback. Always tell the user what is going on. Users don't have a ton of confidence when using a machine. So tell them when something is going wrong and even when something is going right. Why and how. Like, even if they've done something like the most minimal thing that you've asked them to do, give them a positive notification telling them, great job, you did it. Or, thanks for doing this, or whatever it is. Like, users are very intimidated. You might not think you are, but the reality is that when you're on your device, whether it's a mobile phone or a computer, you're actually very intimidated yourself as a human being because you're completely different. It's like, how many of you guys have read Sprint, the Google Ventures book about sprints? No? Okay. I recommend it. It's a great book. They talk about sprints and how they help companies and all that stuff. But there was a company that was focused on creating a robot that would deliver stuff that that people forgot in the hotel. So if a guest in the hotel forgot a toothbrush or something, they would send up a robot and the robot would deliver that for them. So their challenge was, how do we make a robot relatable to human beings and stuff and that doesn't intimidate them? Because could you imagine you call in room service or something and you ask them for a toothbrush and all of a sudden somebody knocks on your door really fast and you open up the door and there's this huge monster robot thing and then all of a sudden it starts opening up and you think it's going to blow you up or something. Like, it's intimidating. It's a big chunk of metal that's standing right in front of you. So it's an intimidating thing. Same thing with your device. Most of us don't know if our devices are secure. That's you being intimidated right there, right? That's you not feeling confident with your device. So the more feedback that you can give your users, the better, always. Next thing is prevent errors. This is for all of you developers and engineers out there. Anticipate where users might run into problems or errors and fix them. Don't let users deal with them. It's not their problem, it's yours. That's just the reality of what we do. And designers face all those things as well, but engineers are the ones that fix them, so thank you. Thank you, Keith. Keith fixes most of my errors. Thrive for consistency. This is like the huge one for me. I should have numbered them, started at 9 and this would be 1. My number one thing is strive for consistency. How many of you guys are familiar with InVision? The most inconsistent platform that exists in the planet Earth. They don't know if they're material design yet, and they don't know if they're what they started off as. Their interface is very, very inconsistent, right? But I love InVision. We use it all the time. So thrive for consistency. Keep same consistency. See, my spelling. That doesn't even make sense. Keep same consistency while using gestures across platforms. This is sometimes hard when designing for different platforms like mobile and tablet, but your goal should always be to create something that your users are familiar with and comfortable using. So one of the things that I wanted to point out with that is, you guys all know who Amazon is, yes? Great. So Amazon has a website. Yes. Amazon has a mobile site. Right? So if you go to Amazon.com on your Safari or whatever internet browser you have on your phone, they have a mobile site. And then Amazon has a mobile app. What's really interesting between those three is that a lot of the same behaviors that you can do on the desktop app, the website that they have for desktop, usually follows through their mobile site and their mobile application, which is really interesting. But a lot of companies don't do that. A lot of companies start saying something like, oh, this is for desktop, so it shouldn't have the same behaviors as it does for mobile. Actually, you should start designing for mobile first, and then adapt the desktop behaviors to what your users are experiencing on mobile, right? So there's a huge difference there that we shouldn't be desktop first, we should always be mobile first, and that's the reason why. You keep consistency, it's just better. So this doesn't mean that you ship 3 times slower, and by that, you guys all know what that means, that you ship your products or releases or whatever it is. It doesn't mean that you ship 3 times slower than you normally do. This just means that you get to know your users better. And it's a huge thing to get to know your users. I've been really privileged to really enjoy talking to people. So what that means for me as a product designer is that I actually take the time and put in the effort to go and sit down with a user that uses my platform and talk to them and hear some of their questions, some of their concerns, some of their thoughts. What are we doing wrong and stuff? One of the things with Creative Market is if we ship something that our community wasn't so we ship something sometimes and the responses we get are like, why are you guys wasting your time on that? You guys should be fixing this, which would help our users, which would help us, our shop owners, and all these different things. So it's always great to listen to your users because they actually know. Okay, so I'll back that up. Yes, users know what they want. Okay, let me phrase that a little bit different. So there's this thing which I found out that Ford guide didn't actually say, and whatever it is. But if you ask people what they want, they'll just tell you they want a faster horse or whatever it is. So as user experience designers and stuff, a lot of times we don't want to ask users what they think about our product because we think that they're just going to give us what they actually want, but it's not what they actually need. That's why you don't just listen to your users, you actually watch your users as well. And then when you do run tests with users, so everything that I push out to a developer to build, I usually test before I do that, and I test it with real live users. For example, right now at Creative Market, we started adding a feature that allows users to purchase a font, and normally when you purchase a font, you have to purchase one specific license, right? So now a user can go on to Creative Market and purchase 50 licenses of that specific font if they wanted to. So that's a feature that we just added to help increase conversions, right, in the checkout process. But one of the things that the team there wanted to do was they really wanted to build the perfect scenario. They wanted to cover all of their bases and build a perfect scenario. The user can't need anything. They need to, this is perfect. So let's just push it out and let's test it. Let's go A/B test something that's perfect. It's the worst idea you can possibly do, right? It's the worst thing you could do. The thing that you really want to do is give them a simplified version of what you're planning to create and start listening to feedback. And this feedback that comes back most frequently is the stuff that you actually need to focus on, or the features that you actually need to add to your checkout process, or whatever it is. So there's a huge gap right now in the industry, I think, with product designers and user experience design and what we're supposed to be doing on all these different things. And test your products, test the stuff that you're shipping, test it with users. Don't just listen to what they have to say. Watch what they're doing, watch people using their devices. All that stuff matters. And if you're going to test something, an A/B test or whatever it is, test a simplified version of what you actually want to test and start listening to feedback. Start talking to users. I think the guys from Google Ventures or somebody, I don't know who has said this, but if you're not spending, as a product designer, if you're not spending at least an hour with your users a week, individually talking to them, then your products are probably pretty crappy because you're not listening to anybody else other than yourself and the people that are so close to the same product that you are, right? So you keep it all in this little circle and prevent any type of feedback. So with all that said, I wanted to open up for some questions, if that's cool. I know that's probably a lot quicker than we expected, but yeah. Is that good?
Yeah.
Oh, thanks. Oh. Does anybody have any questions? Oh, thanks.
What is your exact specialty in general? Like, I mean, you did designer UX. I kind of stepped out. I apologize.
Yeah.
So your role is mainly to do a lot of process planning. Not a coder, I would say.
Yeah, I'm not a developer. Keith has tried to coach me through some HTML and CSS, which is great, but I am not a developer by any means. I am primarily a designer and a behavior designer, if you want to call me that, whatever it is. I focus a lot on, to me, product design is end-to-end design of a product. So that includes interaction design, user experience design, interface design, wireframing, you name it. Like that's what that to me is what a product designer is. Like it involves all of that. So if that makes sense. Yeah. Yes.
So you mentioned that you take issue with developers on error messages, and you're particularly partial to checkout processes.
Mm-hmm.
And just from our own personal interaction with each other, that you do care about the checkout experience, but from your experience in developing in places that I haven't heard of yet because you have a non-disclosure, what do you find in designing for human behavior are some of the other gotchas and pitfalls that us as engineers could start to really pay attention to that could really help us solve a few nightmarish crises for our design friends?
Yeah, that's great. If you think you know it all, you're screwed. That's the biggest thing. I don't care how long you've been an engineer or how long you've been a designer. If you think you know it all or you know more than somebody next to you, you're totally screwed. Because it's not about how much knowledge you have, it's how much you're actually willing to receive from your users. And it's about a collaborative thing. So to me, engineers need to work more with designers and designers need to work more with engineers. And you need to be open to kind of the collaboration. I've sat with Keith and Ben and some of the other developers here at Bethel TV, Bethel Media and stuff, and even the Bethel TV guys and stuff. And we've had conversations back and forth, but the end result, the reality is if there's no tension, then nothing good comes out of it. One of the leaders here at our church, at Bethel Church, Paul Manwaring, he came to talk to our design team one time, and he was talking about tension. And he was just really talking about how everything in the world has tension. If you really think about it, everything is created from tension. Rocks are created from tension, which is crazy, right? And everything else in the world is completely created from tension. So if there's no tension, I mean, if you can't put up with the tension, come on, there needs to be some type of tension. There needs to be some back and forth. Your ideas aren't the best ideas if they don't have feedback from somebody else. That's just, it's not about us. It's about what we're building, Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that helps me understand. I guess I'm just so you talked about kind of the nature of the relationship, but I'm talking even specifics that you've found from your own experience, aspects of software development that are just big pain points for the relationship between designers and developers, and pieces where you're seeing human behavior wise we are totally off base and missing.
Yeah.
Because I found what you said on error messages super helpful. I had the advanced copy of the slides, so
It's on Medium too. It's a post on Medium that I wrote a while ago.
So I happen to already know that kind of a bent towards proper user feedback. But is there another area that you found that we can really work on as sort of a software development?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest, that big pain point of designers working with engineers is always huge. Just that, there's so many things inside of that. There's always a problem of when an engineer thinks they know better than a designer and they start making design decisions, that creates more of a frustration and all these different things. But as designers, take the time. It's not about being super fast. And if you're in a startup environment, everybody's trying to push you and to get stuff done really, really fast. But the reality is, do your best work, take your time, focus, make sure you're like getting all the states correct, because the handoff to an engineer or developer, whatever we want to call it these days, that handoff is critical, because if it's not complete and everything's not thought through, and if you haven't collaborated with everybody, and for example, if I've been working on a product or something for 6 months, which don't do that, use Agile, don't do waterfall, like, yeah, like if I've been working on something by myself for a long time and haven't consulted with any of the developers that are actually going to be building this thing, and then all of a sudden I just hand it off, it's all thought through, but they had no input to it, it's going to come back to you, and they're going to start having some input at that point. And I think the biggest thing is, as developers working with designers directly, like try to get involved, like build a relationship, not just inside the workplace, but build a relationship outside. That way there's that trust between you two as well, and try to get involved as early on in the process. Some design decisions are usually made by designers that don't have any understanding of code and what it takes to build a specific feature. So a lot of times developers don't get to speak into that and like say, like, that's actually really complex to build. What if we did something like this kind of thing? You know what I mean? Does that help?
Yeah, that helps.
Yeah. Yeah, that's just a huge pain point, I think, which is a reality across the board. Yeah. But developers are my friends. Anybody else?
I think you answered the question I was going to. You answered my question before I asked the very end of your line there.
Developers are my friends?
Well, one of the things, like, the biggest problem is, like, like I said, like, designers will go out that way, create a design without no understanding of what's going to happen with the project, and then it gets to the developer, and like, this is like 80 points. I'm sorry, 80 hours.
Yeah.
Worth of work. Why didn't you talk to me first?
Yeah.
That's a major part right
Yeah. I mean, to me, I'd rather sit next to a developer than a designer. Like, I can always come back to the designer, to another designer, and ask, what do you think of this UI, or what do you think about the colors and all these different things? But the reality is, if I'm building a product, I want to be side by side with the developer, because that's who's going to be actually building what I'm creating. You know what I mean? So I'm creating it and birthing it, but they're actually building it. So yeah, it's a huge, huge thing. We were just talking about today, Keith and I, we were talking about how we, in our organization, they worked on a product or a project or something, and the designers and content people and all these different people got together for like a year, and then they came to like Keith, and they're like, okay, yeah, we're over budget, but here you go, can you build it in 1 month? Something they worked on for a year. It doesn't make any sense like that, and then having to go back and start like saying like, I actually probably shouldn't build this that way. It's not going to be very good, and it's not going to work that great, and all these different things. So involve developers, and developers get involved early, and yeah, it's huge. It's a huge thing.
Like you said, a lot of times I would say developers don't take it to actually communicate or go through the funnel so that they're in communication.
Yeah.
That's very what you said. It makes or breaks.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always hard because, yeah, we're all trying to figure things out, but if you can get together with somebody that's different from you, you'll probably build something better than if you had something with a designer that was, had the same mentality as you or whatever. So, cool. Anybody else? No?
Awesome job. Really appreciate it.
Thanks.